Welcome to the American Institute of Architects Kansas City Chapter's Legends and Leaders program. This series highlights AIA architects and others that have helped shape our community, lead the AIA, and mentor a new generation of designers. John Gaunt has been a leader and an advocate for high-quality design throughout his career. John earned a Bachelor's of Architecture from the University of Minnesota in 1964 and a Master's of Architecture from the University of Pennsylvania in 1967. While earning his master's degree, he studied with the famed architect Louis Kahn. His career has included 25 years of professional practice and 21 years as an academic dean. While at KU, he served on more than 24 university-wide committees, many of which drew upon his experience as an architect and designer. He was a member of the KU Master Planning Steering Committee and the Campus Historical Preservation Board, as well as the building committees for the School of Business's new Capitol Federal Hall and for the Health Education Building at the KU Medical Center. Under his leadership, the Departments of Design and Urban Planning were established, and the design-build programs, including Studio 804, became internationally known. John led in the transition of the architecture program to a master's degree. John has extensive experience as a lecturer, speaking at universities including Notre Dame, the University of Southern California, Arizona State University, and other colleges. Prior to coming to KU, Gaunt was with the Minneapolis-based architecture and engineering firm of Ellerby Beckett for 18 years and served as its CEO and president for 6 years. During that time, the firm became the largest in the United States. John has been active in the Kansas City community as a design advisor to the Nelson Atkins and other organizations. In 1994, John was elevated to AIA Fellow. He's received numerous awards, most recently having the lecture hall at Marvin Hall named in his honor. John is perhaps best known for his incredible drawing skills and his congenial personality. Let's meet John.
Hello and welcome to another edition of AIA Kansas City's Legends and Leaders program. We've been interviewing leaders and architects and people that have made a big difference in Kansas City. Now we've done it for about 2.5 years. And today we are going to talk with Dean John Gaunt, the Dean Emeritus from the University of Kansas School of Architecture and Design. So John, we're very happy to see you here today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we first of all always want to know what made you decide to be an architect in the first place.
I'll dig in here to the unanswerable question. From a very early age, I loved drawing. And as things went along at school, my drawings tended to be pinned up on the walls. I remember that very well. I also remember, I can see it so clearly, my father coming home. I often met him at the gate in front of our house. And he handed me a book. And it had to do with a man by the name of Louis Kahn. And I had no idea what it was for. But at a very, very early age, I found myself looking at pictures of the buildings that Louis Kahn had designed. I can't be absolutely certain that that is a starting point. It certainly had to be one of them. There are many starting points, I think.
So you were good at drawing, and also your dad was helping influence you towards architecture.
Yeah.
But John, what's unusual about you is that you spent half your career as a practicing architect and you spent half of your career as the dean at this School of Architecture. But let's start with those early influences. You went to school at 2 different universities too. So can you tell me about your education and who those influences were? Well, so talking about your time in architecture school, you went to your undergraduate at the University of Minneapolis? Minnesota, yes. And so it was at the University of Minnesota, and then you took a graduate degree. But there was a good influence. Okay. So John, you went to the University of Minnesota for your undergraduate in architecture, and had a very high influence there. There was somebody there that was a big mentor for you.
Yes, his name was Ralph Rapson. He designed the famous Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. And he became my first guiding light. I remember it so powerfully, the wonder of the building, and then when I widened it out and saw more of what he did, it was a big factor for me. I can't say it was the original, but it was important. He became my first, let's say, architectural hero. It was the kind of thing that is set up in studios, and we had juries, which I always thought was a sort of unfortunate name for a critique. But Rapson's critique, that was like being in the same room and even having your drawings criticized was so valuable. I treasured it. I treasured seeing the buildings that he had done, and I was on my way as the result in the very first place of his being a teacher at the University of Minnesota.
And that was a great one. And then you had another great one, Louis Kahn at the University of Pennsylvania for your master's.
Yes, one thing leads to another.
Yes.
That was my second heroic architectural guiding light, let's say. I have stories about Louis Kahn, yes. He was an extraordinary teacher, and not in let's say any stream of conversations and so on, but he had a way of, between the work he was doing, which we were always conscious of, and the few words that he could lay out for what he was looking at in terms of our drawings or models. And they always struck home for me in a very mysterious sort of way. He was a person of few words. My father had given me a book on Louis Kahn, so I had some familiarity with his work. And so there was a connection in there that was really critical for me. And,
well, you were both great artists as well. He had a certain way of drawing, and so did you.
Can I describe a little anecdote?
Please do.
We had an assignment from Kahn to go out to Independence Hall and walk away from it into that vast space that exists in front of the hall, and to think about what we would do with it, probably more in terms of landscape than architecture. But then, landscape, architecture, form, function, all of the things that come together. And I did a drawing standing back quite a good distance from Independence Hall. And what was going through my mind was, how would Kahn deal with this? There was a huge, I think, insurance company building just off center with, slightly behind Independence Hall. It's probably still there. And I remember thinking, how in the world do I draw that big ugly building with probably 5,000 windows? And I remember saying to myself, well, how would Kahn do that? And I drew it pretty much the way Kahn would draw it. So the next day in our studio session, we pinned up our drawings, and he would go from one student to another and make his comments and criticisms and so on. The point of it was to be critical so we would learn from it. Kahn looked at my drawing of Independence Hall, and he went closer to it, and he practically put his nose up against it. And then he came back and he looked at me and he said, "Did you do this?" If I'd had my wits about me, I might have said, "No, Mr. Kahn, you did. I just held the pencil. But that didn't strike me at the moment. I said a nervous yes. And he went back and he took another look at it. And what was going on in his mind was he must have thought I had taken a drawing of his out of a book or whatever, because I had been guided to do that drawing by the man himself, only took it one step further probably.
He probably didn't realize you've been looking at his drawings for most of your life.
Probably not. And it was such an interesting thing. He looked at it, turned around and said, "Did you do this?" And I said, "Yes." And he went back and he put his nose against the drawing. At least I thought it was like that. He's really looking at it. And he came back and he looked at me and he said, "Yes." That was it. But that was part of the con experience. He's not going to stand there and deliver a lecture to me. I never did quite figure out what was in his mind. Had I lifted that drawing, or had I really done a drawing as he would have done it? The latter is the case. I think he accepted that. But it's a wonderful memory.
So it was very influential for you to be under his guidance when you were at the University of Pennsylvania, and you graduated then in '67, or
Yes.
and immediately went to work for a firm in Philadelphia, and you were doing a medical office building, I think, in New York.
Yes. And it turned out that I spent some time there. Yes, I did some. I joined a firm there, Lothrop Associates, and they gave me wonderful opportunities. The first building I really designed myself was a school attached to a hospital for children. It's called Blythedale School, and it still exists today. I drew that. I designed the building, and that's at a very early age. And somehow, I guess the people involved had some word that there was a guy around who could design a building for them.
Soon after that, you decided to go back to Minneapolis and begin and ended up staying there for quite a few years.
Yes. Minneapolis had been home for me, and so I was going back home. I worked with a firm, Hamill Green and Abramson, and a very good firm, I think. And I learned a great deal. I was learning the ropes there.
You were there for like 7 years or something, for a while.
Yes, and that followed later on with another Minneapolis firm, Ellerby Beckett. I eventually became the president and CEO of that firm, moving right along.
While you were CEO at Ellerby Beckett, it did quite a bit of growth. It had just, I think that Ellerby and Beckett, I think they had recently retired or were just passing off when you got there. So you knew them, but that had to be another big influence for you.
In 1994, I was the president and CEO, and I was dealing with a firm that had coast-to-coast offices, and there's something about that was not going well for me. I mean, it's a firm that's stretched out and has varying points of view. So I was sort of available at that point. And then one morning, I got a phone call. I can practically remember it word for word. I was at breakfast on a Monday morning, '94, and the voice on the phone introduced himself as provost at University of Kansas. University of Kansas. Anyway, he said, "John, I can get on a plane and fly to Minneapolis if you would meet me at the airport and we could have a cup of coffee. And there, the rest is history. I was very impressed with him, and very interested at that point of making a change. And so I packed up and arrived in Lawrence, Kansas.
I think wasn't one of the reasons that they knew about you was because there was an L.B. Beckett office in Kansas City doing sports.
Yes. Yes.
Because sports was blossoming in Kansas City at the time. And so some of those architects in Kansas City, I think, brought your name to the forefront.
And there was also a man by the name of Dennis Domer at KU who I think had tipped them off about me, if that's the right expression. So he had made the initial connection there.
Dennis was the associate dean at the time, or had been? He'd already been.
Associate, yeah.
Associate dean, yeah. You in as dean, and you stayed for 20 years after your 26 years as a practicing architect and CEO of L.B. Beckett. So tell about what you did at University of Kansas. It was in a big transition at the time. There was a lot of changes in those 20 years.
There were. I was personally involved in developing 4 buildings, if I'm looking at an architectural catalog, 4 buildings that I designed over that period of years. So they had a hard time keeping me away. I was Dean of Architecture, but I also managed to design 4 buildings in the time that I was there. And in some cases, they were rescue buildings. One, a humanities building that was it had 9 arches that were based on medieval Spanish architecture. And I think it was going to be torn down.
It was a power plant or a steam?
Yes, yes. It was being used as a power plant, and its days were numbered. But I stepped in, and I guess I was forceful enough about it that I made that a workable building for the humanities. So I could use that as being a dean and primarily concerned about the education of architects. But I think I've always been so pleased to think that I saved a building that was worth saving and made it into a very workable.
Yes, a new landmark.
Yeah.
It's a landmark,
Yeah.
the Hall Center for the Humanities.
So that's always been a favorite occurrence during my time as the dean.
Well, you also had made some huge program changes. The School of Architecture was always an undergraduate program with a 5th year in order to get a Bachelor of Architecture, and you changed that to a master's, and you also added the PhD program. So there hadn't been one before that, the doctorate program.
Yes. Yes, I was. It was a great opportunity to make some changes that would be long-lasting additions to the university program. So I'm very pleased that I can look back on that. I'm very pleased that I was involved in those.
Well, one of the other pieces of architecture you worked on was the forum at Marvin Hall, which was where the School of Architecture is located. And so that is the conference center really for the lecture hall for the School of Architecture, recently named after you.
A topical matter, yes. It was, I was very pleased with the way that worked out. It was my baby, so to speak.
Well, you also always had a drawing class every year. I took it one year, And so you were always teaching other people to draw. So that was a big influence of you that you had as well.
Did I give you good grades?
We can cut this part. So another thing that we would like to know about is that you are a fellow in the AIA, and you've had influences there as well. You've come to Kansas City and done some things. And I'm wondering, what has been your relationship, and what do you think about all that we do here as the AIA?
Well, in terms of time spent, it's not impressive, but it was an important connection, obviously. And I was always pleased to communicate on any appropriate subject that would come along. So I think I could claim a good working relationship.
Well, we always have, I want to know also if you have some other hobbies and interests that have influenced you. I think there's a whole theme through your work that we haven't talked about yet.
I have loved traveling, and there is the connection with my drawing that has been central for me for my entire life. I can go back to childhood and make that a continuous interest. I always loved drawing, and for example, I had a couple of visits to Havana, which if you have a pencil in hand and a drawing pad, is truly a wonderful place to be. So I'm just using that as a kind of example. I've loved traveling. Actually, the first really, what I will say is a very good drawing as a result of travels was in Paris at Notre Dame. That still stands as my favorite because of its place in my development. It was a joy to do it, and I still look at it and it seems alive to me.
You did a special exhibition in a art showroom in Lawrence. I remember attending that. And so you had some of your sculpture and your drawings.
Yes, I think you're referring to one that was done jointly with my son.
That's right.
Which has to be registered as a high point in my life. He's an artist and has eclipsed the master, possibly. He's very good. It was a high point for me because I saw him. I was certainly an influence on him, but I saw him progress into his own artistry. And that may be the one you're referring to. It was a high point in my life. Father-son exhibition.
Well, we're wondering what you would tell a young architect today, knowing what you've known over the last 50 years of your career, and what do you wish you knew when you began, or what would you like to tell them that you learned? It's hard to go back to that because in that intervening time, we now live in an electronic world. And so the matter of drawing in a school of architecture is not what it once was. In fact, it's very far removed from what it was for me as a young aspiring architect. So the drawing was so critical, but it no longer is. There's nothing wrong with drawing well, but as I said, we're in an electronic world, and it has changed very markedly. Well, John, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you coming to see us at the Legends and Leaders here at AIA Kansas City.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure to be here with you. I thank you, and I have enjoyed the conversation.
Well, that concludes another one of our editions of the Legends and Leaders, and goodbye for now.